Recently, I was a guest on a podcast, and I was hoping that it would get thousands of views. And maybe it will. I don't know. It hasn't come out yet. But here's the thing. What happens if you're a guest on a podcast and then you mess up and you say the wrong things in front of everybody, in front of a worldwide, thousands deep audience about the thing that you do and have done for 16 years, that you have 2 degrees in? What do you do? Would you pretend it didn't happen? Would you blame it on your nerves? Would you spiral and eat a ton and isolate yourself? Or would you come back and tell the truth? So that is what I'm trying to do right now, is I'm choosing that last thing where I'm just going to go back and fix it. So I was recently a guest on Arlan Hamilton's YouTube channel. I paid for the opportunity to speak to her. She interviewed me about my education business, Off the Beaten Path Learning. So I am an educator, and I have been since 2010. I'm also neurodivergent. This is important to know because a lot of what I messed up was speaking about neurodivergence. Inclusive learning is my business. It is my life. It is my lived experience. It is the lens through which I understand education. So imagine how disappointed I was when I was listening to the recording of myself with Arlan and I just didn't speak the way I wish I had spoken. When I went on Arlan's podcast, I prepared for so much about it. It felt like I had prepared for everything, except the very important piece of being technical, of being an expert in my domain, right? We all have a zone of genius. Mine is about learning. Mine is about neurodiversity, more so learning, to be fair. But still, I don't know this stuff like that. And I wanted to speak more about neuroscience. I wanted to be more specific. I wanted to kind of flip through the books that I regularly use and reference in order to prepare for this podcast, right? I even made a whole video about preparing for a podcast. And I did a lot of the steps on that list, but I did not go back and refresh my memory on what does neurodivergent mean? What does disabled mean? What is it? What is a disability? So I was prepared, to talk about business, to speak confidently. I had tested my technology, my Zoom, my lighting, my audio. I practiced my posture and my energy and my pacing, which I don't know if you can tell, but those things are all pretty difficult for me. And yet I had stepped back from probably the most important piece of it, which was my technical expertise in the field of inclusive learning. So that's not humble, and that's not what I value. And so it was a mistake. So here's what I would have done differently. Here's what I would change. First, when we spoke about neurodivergence and neurodiversity, I should have said more specifically and more explicitly certain types, certain expressions, right? People, for the most part, have no idea what that word means. They may have heard of it, they may think they know what it means, but they don't automatically think of ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, OCD, Tourette's, sensory processing differences, epilepsy, schizophrenia. They don't think of the breadth of the wide scope that is the umbrella of neurodivergence. And I should have used more familiar words. And honestly, I'm not even totally that's not my strength. It's my job as an educator to make complex simple. And yet, it's not my strength. Being articulate is not always the thing I am best at. Second thing I would have done different. When we spoke about disability, I would have really liked to have been way more accurate in my definition. I didn't mention anything about time or function. So definition as I think of it, if I could have gone back just in this moment. Disability is when you have a condition or a disorder that gets in the way of your daily functioning for a prolonged period of time. So it's not just like you had a bad day or you had a bad week. It is you had a very bad series of weeks or months or years. And it's not that it's all bad. Like here's the thing, right? Like I don't want us to put a judgment to say that disabled lives are sucky lives. I don't think so. I think I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't have the disabilities I have. I think I wouldn't be able to help the people that I help in the way that I help them if I didn't have the lived experience that I have. I am, dare I say, grateful for my problems. But grateful as I may be, I also don't want to romanticize disability. Although it is not a sucky life, it does have its serious impediments, serious hurdles, serious difficult parts of that, right? If you are a rolling person, I recently heard the term for people that are in a wheelchair and they have to access the world from their wheels. This one person on Instagram, I heard her call them rolling people. She was a teacher, I think, and she was speaking about one of her students who is a rolling person. And he was upset. He was like, I don't want to be a rolling person. I want to be a walking person. And she didn't quite know what to respond to that with, but she did validate. She did validate his feelings. Anyway, all of that is to say, I'm on a tangent. Skirt. Disability is not just a label, it has an impact, a real impact on a person's life for a prolonged period of time, whether that's socially, academically, um, intellectually, and precision matters, words matter. And I don't think I was slow or informed enough in that moment to really pay attention to that. Um, Another thing that came up was that Arlan asked me if I identify as disabled or neurodivergent. She also even said, is that okay for me to ask that? And then she said, maybe you can teach us something about that. So my response was, you can ask whatever, I guess. Wrong, no. What I would have said, what I should have said, is that it is a little bit of an invasive question. I think in a certain context, it could be a very invasive question. Sometimes it's actually illegal to ask. For example, when you're being hired, that is something you self-disclose. An employer would not be asking you about that. They assume that you saw the job responsibilities, right? And there's no discrimination against people with disabilities that is allowed in this country of the United States anyway, because of the history that people actually fought for that. They fought for the right for that to be protected in their identities. And so if a person wants to disclose that, or if they self-identify as like, I can't do the job, right? If the job is to pick up things that are very heavy, and I don't have arms, then I can't do that job, but I can do another job. And maybe at that job, I don't want to disclose that I don't have arms because I'm perfectly able to do it, and I don't want you to think anything differently of me. For an example, I have scoliosis and sciatica, and they're both pretty bad. And so I cannot have jobs where I stand for long periods of time. Um, Even having good posture sometimes is something that I struggle with because, well, I mean, I guess, anyway, so that question is invasive and rude. But I'm glad she asked because I choose to be open about answering that question. And she knows that because we know each other. So I should have told her, you know me, I know you, you know me that I'm all like you already know that I'm disabled, Arlan. And yes, it's okay for you to ask that on YouTube. Um, but know that it's not always going to be okay. In fact, usually the standard is that it's not okay. Do not ask that. If you're close to someone and they're talking about that kind of topic, then be in the moment, be in that present moment and kind of read the room on what's okay and what's not. Not every context is the same. How am I supposed to predict every single situation in the world? But usually, don't ask that. And I should have said that explicitly, even though I am an open book about that stuff, right? So I a summary of what I would have said, that question can be invasive depending on the context and who you're asking. And that's it. But I'm open about it, and I'm open about it on purpose. Um, and I also didn't explain why that is, why I'm strategically an open book about this. And that's important, right? So I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that now in this video. I'm open about my diagnoses and my identification as someone that is neurodivergent because I know that it inspires people younger than me. I know it inspires and their parents. I know it inspires the learners and the families that I work with. It gives them hope because they see a significant portion of my pain from the past and they can understand how I understand them. I have also learned tools. I have researched information. I have gathered knowledge. I have gone through intentional healing. And so I can share the culmination of this work. Uh, and I also understand that those who don't wish to identify themselves publicly or even privately, they don't need to. It's not, that's completely valid to not ascribe to any label. Um, I understand myself and the role that I play in society. And I think for me, very specifically, it's important that I am open about my labels. If I'm going to teach about inclusive learning, I can't hide the parts of myself that got me to this place of understanding. That would be counterproductive. And this is how we chip away at that stigma. This is how we chip away at the misinformation, at the fear. People fear people with disabilities, especially psychiatric disabilities, especially, um, learning disabilities, behavioral disabilities sometimes. But if we're just more understanding about that, through people's experiences and stories, uh, we can get further. So this video is an apology. And the other part of it is a promise that I will go forward more humble. I will go forward with more preparation. I will go forward knowing that I am in a position that is, I must be responsible and take ownership over this position. I must not, I was recently reading this line from the Bible that said something like about not hiding a lamp under the bushes or something like that. It was I don't know. Anyway, basically the message of this line was if you've got it, use it. Like, don't hide your power, your knowledge, don't gatekeep that stuff. Use it to help people, use it to reveal the light, to enlighten. Um, Speak about these things publicly, and speak about them accurately, because that's what is the responsible and humble thing to do. For listening, I am grateful that I had the opportunity to, think back on this and just be more, do a self-examination of what worked and what didn't and what I can do going forward. So if this was helpful to you, I'd love to know how. Leave a comment, or subscribe for more about the education business and about the education model of self-directed education. Okay, thank you.